still in sunny Scottsdale. Day 2 of Intellicon with our friends at Skip. And I'm joined by a man who needs no introduction. It's Pat Wall. Pat, I'm going to go right into off the top. You've got a new book out.
Yeah.
People know you for your LinkedIn, all of the events. You were just doing a panel session here at Skip. You've been a part of a ton of stuff with Clue and the Compete Network. And now, I don't know how the heck you do all of this. You've got a book out, Culture of Compete. Tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's I'm really excited. Me and a good friend of mine, Bruce Lynch, we decided, hey, I know competitive intelligence. He's a great writer. Let's bring us both together and build a book that's good for people to understand. Hey, how do I build a good competitive intelligence program? And the way I framed the book was 10 years ago when I was starting out, I didn't know squat about CI. I was just a product marketer who got thrown CI on his desk. And so I built this book as a way for people to say, hey, this is a great way of building a competitive intelligence program and building it so that it lasts, but also so you can grow it.
Do you have a favorite part? Is there something, as you were there's probably a lot of reflection that comes with building a book like this. Is there something, and a lot of like looking back as to what you did in the past? Is there something that you're like, this is my favorite section, or the meatiest part?
It's always, I'm big about competitive enablement. So a lot of it's about competitive enablement. How do you actually enable sales? Because everyone thinks like, oh, I'm going to build a battle card and they're just going to read it and love it and it's going to be the best thing in the world. But in reality, it's more about, hey, how many times you have to enable sales, different ways you can enable sales, and also tips and tricks on like, hey, you can do a competitive cocktail session at your skull, or you can do a monthly competitive corner session. Different ways that you can actually make it so that people understand competition, but make it in a fun way.
On that enablement piece, I was dying this morning at your metaphor, your analogy around enablement, and sellers may or may not be like puppies.
Absolutely.
What, in what way? It was so good. Also, anyone, this is the lost tapes, no one will be able to actually see that session live in Telecon. You missed out. There were many hilarious stories and analogies, but the puppy analogy, can you share a little bit about that from the sales standpoint and how you support them?
Absolutely. So, I always say sales reps are like puppies, right? When you have a puppy, a puppy just doesn't come right away and say, oh my God, I know everything, right? You have to train it. You have to teach it how to walk on a leash. It's really exciting and wants to learn, but a lot of times it also squirrels and has to pee and it wants to chew on the carpet and wants to do everything like that. And so you kind of have to say like, hey, sales, they have a lot of stuff coming at them. They're very busy. They have customers and POs and POVs, and they have a lot of stuff. So when you send them competitive intelligence and when you share competitive intelligence, they're not going to get it right away. They're not going to be like, okay, done, cool. But you have to repeatedly train them, repeatedly work with them to make it so that they understand competition. And sometimes help them by saying, hey, this is how you do it this way. This is how you can do it that way. Don't do that. Like telling a puppy, don't pee on the carpet. You tell a sales rep, don't say that to a customer. And so, but it's that way of doing that you can actually help them to build that repetition. And it's just because they have a lot of stuff on their plate. And so having the empathy for sales and understanding that, hey, they got a ton on their plate and they don't live in competition, but I do, and giving that up.
So actually, this is teeing me up for something I wanted to get to later in the conversation. So I'll bring it up now. But we just launched a research report with where we surveyed revenue leaders, getting their takes on their sales reps. The data is coming out soon, but one of the interesting facts that came from it was 72% of revenue leaders are really confident in the fact that their sellers know their big differentiators and they know their competitors' big differentiators. But only 31% are confident that sellers can actually communicate or display that differentiated value effectively. So from your perspective, like you've talked about here on this enablement piece, what are some of the ways that you have effectively bridged the gap for sellers from knowing these things to actually being able to execute?
It's being a partner with them. It's really about being a partner with sales, right? You need a CI, you need to be sales focused. You can be product focused as well, but sales is usually our main customer. And the way I look at it is you need to make it so that people understand the piece of CI, but you gotta make it easy, digestible. You gotta make it really simple. This is the 3 things to say when you hear this competitor. These are the 3 things to say when you hear this competitor. Here's the reason why. And also you have to kind of help them train to say, hey, like, we're not gonna bash the competitor. A lot of sales reps are like, just give me what they're bad at. I'll tell them. It's like, no, don't bash the competitors. Instead, talk about your strengths and how we differentiate, because that's going to show their weaknesses, because they're going to go to that competitor and they're going to say, well, show me this, show me these analytics, or show me this capabilities. And they're like, oh, well, we can't do that, or we're not as good. So play up to the strengths and differentiation, and that's going to help you with enable sales.
On that note, we've been talking with a ton of Clue customers and a lot of folks on the podcast so far around quantifying and closing your competitive revenue gap. And at its core, it's helping tip those winnable deals, those neck and neck deals. You know, the ones, especially in the cybersecurity space where it's so competitive. Can you tell me about your most memorable competitive win on your team? That one where you know the seller is dropping the notes if you're on Slack and it's patting that team that helped me win.
Yeah, absolutely. One recently, there was a very large bank, and we were working with them, and they were trying to go with a different competitor, and we were having conversations, and we got to a point where we're like, well, why do you want to do this? Like, what's making you think about moving to a different, solution? And they were like, well, we were asked to do it. We were asked to look into it. And we were like, well, who asked you? And they said, oh, the CISO. And we said, why? And they said, well, he has a relationship with someone. And so we said, okay. And so we said, okay, the relationship's great. But what we did is we said, let's take a step back and let's talk about, okay, so you have this CISO. Do you want this? Like, do you actually want this to happen? And they're like, well, no, we like your product, but we have to prove it. We have to prove to CISO why we want to use your product. So we kind of, originally they were just like, tell us all about the bad stuff about your competitor. Instead, we said, hey, let's tell you all the good stuff about this product and all we're doing for you, and doing that, and then show that to the CISO instead of just doing that. It was actually very well.
And that was an existing customer?
Yeah.
Oh, so this is interesting. So I was actually going to get into the topic of retention too. This is another thing when we surveyed revenue leaders, the most important revenue stream in 2023 is retention. I think that it's commonplace across, like, we're understanding that in the times we're in, that retention is incredibly important. And I mean, I was going to ask you, is retention a competitive initiative for you? But you've answered it there. In what ways do you help retain customers from a competitive standpoint? Because I think that topic is overlooked right now. Or maybe not overlooked. It just, people aren't looking that way.
To be honest, that's my biggest priority right now for this year, is actually retention and helping retain customers. Because you look at the economic times we're in, everyone's trying to do more with less, right? Everyone's trying to cut budgets, cut everything, right? And so if they can find a cheaper solution, if they can find something that's, a little bit less, they're going to do that. And guess what? Your competitors know that. And they're going to go to your existing customers and say, we can do this for X number amount cheaper. And so that's one thing you have to be really careful about. So you have to build competitive intelligence. And yeah, it may be 25% cheaper on paper, but it's going to take 50% more of your time to work with this product, or it's not going to help out. It's not going to scale to the point where you need. So it's making sure that giving proof points about how, yes, this is cheaper on paper, but in the long run, it's actually going to cost you a lot more.
What are some of the things that you take on to support retention from like your like a tactical standpoint? Like, how does that look compared to supporting net new deals, for example?
Yeah, so a lot of times net new deals, it's a lot with sales, right? It's sales reps, hunters. Retention a lot of times is actually with customer success. And so it's actually building a relationship with customer success to have them understand, hey, competitive intelligence, you need this, because guess what? Your customers, there is churn. Churn's happening, right? Everyone's going to have churn. But how do we minimize the churn, and how do we minimize churn from particular customers? And can we actually look and say, okay, yeah, this customer, or this competitor is actually going after this verticals or this target for churn. And so then we can take that and say, hey, tactically, let's do a training for the CSMs on, this competitor or this group of competitors, and how we actually help them win.
You had an interesting journey. I believe it was from solutions engineer to product marketer to now full own and compete, correct? That kind of path. Do you remember, as this kind of path is going on and you're kind of learning as you go, do you remember that first time where a seller closed that competitive deal that you were involved in and you supported? Do you remember that first big win?
Absolutely. And it was actually when I was SC, I was a sales engineer. And I became kind of like the competitive sales engineer, because I just was looking, I was like, I got annoyed from losing from this one particular competitor. And so what I did was I said, I'm just going to research this competitor. I went deep into this competitor, and I became an SC. I was an SC, and they were like, "Oh, well, Pat knows the competitor really well," and so we were up against the competitor, and I basically just showed it demo, and I said, "Here's all the things that we can do," and they said, "Wow, that's amazing." And then they said, "No, we had this other." They said, "We just saw a demo from your competitor, and they can't do anything that you did, like you showed me," and I knew that because I literally dug so deep into them that I actually knew what they can't do, and I showed them, and we actually won that deal after the POV because of that.
And that kind of shows the power. That's interesting because I know you love to say solutions engineers are your competitive ninjas, and solution engineers are sort of a seller's best friend for closing a deal. But it almost showed you as you're going through being a solutions engineer the value of understanding your competitors. You put it into practice, and now it's completely almost driven your career trajectory. That deal.
And the other thing is you have to remember is like 12 years ago, solution engineers, sales engineers, that was customer success. Like customer success wasn't around 10 years, like 12 years ago, or it was in small pockets. So like, I understand retention because that's what I was doing. I was doing the support and working with the customers who were there and saying, "Hey, yeah, let me help you with this. Let me do this," because that's how we actually gain those customers' trust to actually expand them.
On that winnable deal story, uh, where you help retain the customer, I'm curious at what point do you get tagged in as someone in compete, and is like how do you see compete fitting with customer success and this retention initiative? What point should you be working with them in the future as well?
So I mean, first off, I should be enabling it from the start, right? That you need when we say competitive enablement, I think we need to talk about customer success right now as a part of competitive enablement. We're still focused on sales a lot, but we need to move that shift as a practice to say we need to enable customer success because that's where a lot of people are going right now. And to be honest, like customer success is kind of the new sales and SaaS really, and so that's where you're looking at. And so when I get pulled in, it's more along how complex the deal is, how the significance of the pricing and the packaging of the deal, and that's when they bring me in and say, "Okay, Pat, we need an expert on this. This is a threshold that we hit where we need an expert to come in and kind of present to the customer on the XYZ."
How do you enable CS? How are you approaching this compared to sales? What are some of the things, the practices that you would suggest someone else to take on that are doing this? Because again, I think this is a new space for people to come in. As you mentioned, like CS hasn't been around for long.
It's not. It's still relatively new. And one of the things what I do when I'm trying to enable success is customer success is put it a little differently, right? Like customer success is you want to make the customer happy. You want to make them stay, not churn. And so you need to understand like where they're coming from, the customer. And so also like, if they're looking at a different solution when their contract's up, why? Is it because they weren't trained enably? Is it was because this competitor came us at a price discount? Is it because someone asked? And so it's kind of helping them to understand, hey, these are things that we can work together within CI to say, yeah, yes, this customer's cheaper, but it's going to affect you here. Or yes, this is a really cool new feature, but it's only a feature, and we're going to have that feature in 6 months, and we're going to have much better.
Have you learned anything since kind of shifting your focus to the retention side?
Absolutely. I mean, like it's you definitely have to learn a little differently, right? Like with sales, they're very aggressive, giving the hits, let's go. Customer success is more about like having that study and understanding them and working with them to train them a little more. Hey, this is why it's going to help you.
Interesting. I love to kind of close on this question. What is your biggest mistake you've made in your compete career so far, and what was the lesson you learned?
Biggest mistake I ever did was taking on too much work. I think sometimes as a young competitive individual, you take on a lot of work, you take on a lot of projects from all different people, every sales rep, executives, right? And you take on too much, and then you kind of burn out. You burn out because you have so much information, and so you need to be strategized. You need to strategize. That's that word. But you really need to understand that, like, hey, I can only do so much, and how do I build that priority? Where's that priority going? Why are we doing this? And here's the roadmap for the next six months, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do in the next 6 months after.
I love that. I mean, that's a common answer we've heard a ton this week is don't just say yes to everything.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you taking the time here. We've got karaoke tonight. We've got a nice dinner tonight. So thank you for stopping by. You've already killed it on the panel. You've been talking to everyone at the conference. And anytime we get to talk with you, this is a pleasure. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.